What is up, Light Fam? Welcome to another video. My name is David, your spiritual awakening coach, here to help you through your spiritual awakening. Now, one of the most common requests that I get when people come to me for coaching is how to feel good enough. And it's usually a safe bet that if this is a pretty frequent coaching request, then the collective also needs assistance with this as well. And I always want to make videos that empower people on their spiritual journey. So your perception of self-worth affects every aspect of your life. Everything you have in your physical life is a reflection of your self-worth. So how you approach life, how you treat yourself, how you treat others is all a reflection of your perceived self-worth, whether that perception be conscious or subconscious. So let's dive into this all-important topic of how to feel good enough so that you can live a life that is in alignment with your true worth. Right now, let's go. How to feel good enough. Notice I said how to feel good enough. I didn't say how to be good enough. You already are good enough. You're a fractal of source consciousness. You're a piece of the divine pie. Isn't the piece of the pie made of the exact same stuff as the whole entire pie? Could source consciousness ever not be good enough? Of course not. The thing is that your perception of self gets filtered through your ego. So you guys have heard me use the term beyond the veil in previous videos, and usually what I'm referring to is the veil that separates the non-physical from our five senses. But I also believe that there is a personal veil that separates us from actualizing our identity as source. And that personal veil is, you guessed it, the ego. And I love how Wayne Dyer puts this. He says the ego stands for edging God out. So the ego tells you that you are not the same as source. You are something completely different and separate from source. So the personal veil of ego is what separates you from unity consciousness. So the personal veil of ego, if your personal veil of ego is very thick, you are living in separation consciousness. You believe in scarcity, competition. You see other people as either better than you or you see them as beneath you. But when you're living in unity consciousness, you understand that we are all source, having a temporary physical experience to get a greater understanding of our true divine eternal essence through physical contrast. And this type of understanding comes from having a thinner personal veil of ego. Now that we've established what you actually are, how do we get you to understand it on a subconscious level? Because it's not enough to logically understand something in your head. You have to understand it in your heart, where the subconscious is said to live. So it's your subconscious perception of worth that creates your reality. Your subconscious perception of worth dictates the actions that you take and also determines what you are a vibrational match to in the quantum field, which then dictates what you experience. So we've got to bridge the head and the heart together. So how do we bridge the head and the heart together? You know, many times when I tell people to step into alignment with their true identity as source, I see that confused look. I see the wheels turning, almost as if they're trying to figure out how to sit up on a cloud with a white beard and throw thunderbolts and part seas and crumble mountains. All that stuff is very Hollywood and very biblical, of course. But connecting with source can be just as easy as watching a bird effortlessly glide through the air, watching the waves crash onto the shore, or watching the breeze tickle the leaves of a tree. Notice how all of those things are just life effortlessly working together as an extension of source. The bird is always provided for. The bird doesn't hate itself. The bird doesn't believe it's unworthy of love. The bird is not seeking validation from other birds. The bird is simply living in the moment as an extension of source, whether it's aware of it or not. So this brings me to my first step on how to feel good enough, and that is to get out in nature. Seeing the natural flow of source energy is usually much easier in nature. I like to analogize an urban setting or a city with all of its rules and hierarchies and structures as ego. And then I'll analogize nature as source. Now, of course, it's all source, but the mind likes to break things down, so humor me for a second here. But if we look at a city as ego, notice how complicated, busy, and distracted the ego makes everything with its rules and structures and beliefs. But then if we take a look at nature, we see that nature, like source, like truth, is usually very simple. So get out in nature and get centered into the present moment. Just find a quiet spot where you can get still and give thanks for everything that you already have in your life so that you are centered in an allowing state of gratitude, centered in the present moment. And then what I want you to do is take your conscious awareness and put it into your heart chakra. Then I want you to perceive all the nature around you through the perception of your heart. So you're connecting with source energy through your heart, through love. It's the heart chakra that is the portal to higher consciousness. So while you're out in nature, connected to life through your heart chakra in a place of love and gratitude, I then want you to ask the question, who is it that does not believe you're good enough? I think you'll come to the stark realization that this is not a belief that the real you actually holds. I don't even think that you can believe that you're not good enough if you are in a place of love and gratitude, because those two concepts carry opposing frequencies. And since love is the dominant frequency of source consciousness, you can trust that this concept of you not being good enough is not coming from higher consciousness. That must mean it's coming from the mind or from ego. Opening your heart chakra is how you get the ego out of the way and open the portal to your eternal self. So as your conscious perception is centered in your heart chakra, I want you to contemplate the fact that you are whole, complete, and perfect. Now, if you try to contemplate these facts logically with your mind, your ego will jump in and steal your joy by comparing you to someone else or whatever your concept of perfect, whole, and complete is. But when you're in nature, connected to Mother Gaia, your perception of self is coming through your heart chakra. Doesn't perfect feel like your natural state? Yes, this is the real you. It's only out of alignment humans operating from ego that come up with all these limiting cliches that we've all heard. Oh, no one is perfect. I found perfection in my imperfections. Yeah. Well, let me let you in on something. Something can only be imperfect if you compare it to something else. So comparison is the thief of all joy. It's the ego that believes in comparison and competition. You are perfect. You are perfectly where you're supposed to be on your evolutionary journey. But as soon as you compare yourself to someone else or whatever your concept of perception of perfection is, you're no longer centered in the present moment. Now your mind, your ego, is off in some future scenario, which doesn't even exist because only the present moment exists, where you will be perfect. You guys have heard me say it before. If the caterpillar beat itself up for not being a perfect butterfly, how many butterflies would we have in the world, right? I mean, the caterpillar would probably be so low in self-esteem, low self-worth, it wouldn't even bother getting into the cocoon because it's comparing its current state to some future perfect butterfly scenario. So you are perfect. Say it with me. I am perfect. How to feel good enough? Well, as I just mentioned, don't compare yourself to anyone else or your perception of perfect, because these are really just constructs of the ego, which means they don't exist. But let's take this a little bit deeper. If you've had a spiritual awakening, then that means that you're waking up from identifying as the ego and stepping into observation of the ego. And this is really consciously moving from the 3D into higher consciousness. The higher consciousness you already identifies as whole, complete, and perfect. What does this mean? Well, it means anytime that you do not feel good enough or you self-sabotage, you have stepped out of higher consciousness. You've separated yourself from source consciousness and stepped into the 3D by identifying as the ego. And this is a false perception of self because the ego is something that you have. It's not something that you are. How to feel good enough? Well, you need to have a conversation with the real you and not your ego. And you can have this conversation in the mirror. Why not look at yourself in the mirror and see wholeness, completeness, and perfection? But wait, don't look at the physical avatar and let the ego jump in and start judging what it's looking at. No, look through your own eyes. They say the eyes are the window to the soul. So look into your soul through your eyes and say, I am enough. Scratch that. I am more than enough. And while you're at it, tell yourself I love you. And what did we say the dominant frequency of source is? Yeah, love. So this is how you stop separating yourself from source through ego and you start aligning with source through and as love. What does as love mean? Well, it means you're self-identifying as the walking physical embodiment of love itself. So when you see yourself through the eyes of source, it's impossible to not feel good enough. It's impossible to not feel love because you now understand that you are love. Now, question of the day. How do you remind yourself that you are good enough? Leave those suggestions in the comments below, Light Fam, so that we can all learn from one another and raise our collective vibration. If you want to work one-on-one with me, you need a helping hand on how to feel good enough, we can work one-on-one through Zoom. Check the description for that. Remember to follow me on Instagram _Lightways. Ask me a question over there. You usually give me some good video ideas out there, Light Fam. Smile at a stranger, send some good vibes. We'll see you in the next video. Light, love, and abundance to all that are watching and to all you love. Peace, guys.